And don't forget to hit that like, share the show, annoy the maggot in your life. And I think we've had some trolls lately who I guess show up because they think RFK Jr. knows what he's doing, or they like Kristi Noem's push for real ID, and they like the extradition of U.S. citizens to a foreign country without due process because, liberty. I mean, you know what? You and I don't know why. I mean, this is like, I feel kind of silly. Maybe our problem is, and this would be a question for, Glenn Beck and Greg Kelly and all that crowd, and fucking Jesse Water on the Brain and Rob Shit and all those people. I have, it's so weird. I have been assuming that when these guys were swearing an oath to the Constitution, that they meant the U.S. Constitution. But the Confederacy had its own constitution. Maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe I need to read that thing again. Maybe this all makes sense if you are defending the Confederate Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. If you read it, you're like, oh, okay, sure, right? It'll make sense all of a sudden. Anyways, so we'll get to that in a minute. But Hannity has on RFK Jr. because he's doing fucking cleanup. Okay. In Colorado, you can opt out of having your license scanned for lottery tickets, cigarettes, alcohol, cannabis, etc. You just hand over a birth date without other info. I don't know that that's a good idea. Because the whole purpose of that in that situation is so that kids don't buy it or people under 18. I would argue under 25 would be better because your brain is still cooking. Your brain has not fully formed. I would not do chemical interventions on the human brain willingly until after that. I know of that with alcohol, that ship has sailed, but I'm telling you, I'm not for it. So yeah. All right. Now let's jump in here. This is, I'm not familiar with this guy's show. He seems to be very full of himself. I mean, who the fuck does this guy think he is? Hal Sparks?
All right, yesterday, the Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., held a...
Did you work all weekend on that that tooth whistle, Sean? Health and Human Services Secretary? Say, somebody's got a bear stuck in the hole. He does
press conference about autism, which has now increased in children at extremely alarming rates over the...
Okay, simmer down. No, it hasn't. We have spotted it more, and we've broadened the definition of it to include a lot of things. And the extreme autism that he's talking about, we used to call mental retardation or call people morons or idiots when they were to the point where they were nonverbal and non-communicative or violent or incapable of understanding, regular interactions. There's also even a derivation of Asperger's, which is within and outside this spectrum because it's often aligned with it at the same time, although a separate diagnosis in and of itself. And because of the breadth of the autism spectrum, the vast majority of people who have it are functional. They just deal with some neurodivergent issues. We'll get into that. Good God, this asshole.
Few decades. Here's a bit of what Secretary Kennedy had to say yesterday.
Secretary Kennedy had to say yesterday.
Look.
The ASD prevalence rate in 8-year-olds is now 1 in 31. Shocking.
The autism spectrum disorder is 1 in 31 amongst 8-year-olds. This is the assertion. Now, I would argue that is due to the broadening of the spectrum itself. Perhaps even overdiagnosis might be the issue. Not that it's spread, but that the definition of it has been watered down and spread out so much that they are just, taking a lot of different maladies and a lot of different things and kind of cramming them into one singular definition. Happens all the time. In the same way that you could say that the people that have cancer in our society is enormous, but there are lots of different kinds of cancer. And there's the really bad ones like colon and pancreatic cancer that can fuck you up right away. And then there's other ones that you'll outlive, like prostate cancer and other things. And there's a variance in between. So you can say the prevalence of cancer is like this, but it's not like everybody's stage 4 all at once. That's the problem with how he talks about this. One of the problems with how he talks about this.
Extreme risk for boys. Overall, the risk for boys of getting an autism diagnosis in this country is now 1 in 20. There are studies that, that look at maternal activation, so that, something happens in the womb. There are studies that look at other genetic cause. The issue that we know is genes don't cause epidemics. You need an environmental toxin.
Okay, again, the epidemic and epidemiology having to do with the spread of a disease as opposed to the expansion of a disease is also where he's playing fast and loose. And when we think of like a pandemic or an epidemic, we think of a disease that spreads, caused by a spread directly. Not, and we loosely use the term a lot of times of epidemic when there's a lot of cases of something, although that assumes correlation that may not be there. And that's the problem with the vaccine shit and what he said before. And I would also like to point out that most of this, including what he talks about with Hannity, I think, we'll look into what he says afterwards, has a lot to do with the fact that he was basically promising for years that vaccines cause this shit. And now he's like, we're going to figure it out. We don't know. And you're like, motherfucker, we got 3 dead kids from measles because you convinced people that autism, the chances of getting autism are higher and worse than the chances of dying from measles if you're a little kid. So they're just like, let them have it. And that's on you.
And we're going to look at all the potential culprits. We're going to look at mold. We're going to look at food additives. We're going to look at pesticides. We're going to look at air and water.
Jewish space lasers?
And medicines.
All right, here with more is the Secretary.
By the way, for the record, this is Hannity helping the administration with cleanup. That's his fucking job now. He walks behind the administration with a pooper scooper now and helps them clean the road in the parade for MAGA.
Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Great to see you. How you doing?
Good to see you.
Got a lot of feedback when we went to Steak and Shake. Pretty cool.
You tried to set me up with that milkshake.
I did not try to set you up with it. They brought it over. It wasn't my fault. All right, I watched this yesterday, and here are the numbers. 1 in 31 kids have autism, okay? If you go back to just...
No. The ratio is 1 in 31 and are on the spectrum. That does not mean that they have what is, he calls later full-blown autism.
16, 8 years ago, it was 1 in 54. If you go to 2000, it was 1 in 150. What was the number?
Yeah, but we were also using phrases like retardation back then. More, and now they've moved in using that term. It's like an updating of the terminology after a while.
When you were a kid, and what do you think is going on?
Well, there's really good data on that. There were many studies in the peer-reviewed literature. Probably the most important study was the biggest epidemiological study in history at that time in Wisconsin. It looked at 900,000 kids. It's published in a high gravitas journal, peer-reviewed study.
This would be called appeal to experts or appeal to elitism in arguments, something that these assholes have told us for a long time we cannot do. You can't trust elites and science, and they tell you to trust the science. But now he wants, when it says, or when he can shape it into saying what he wants it to say, then he's going to say, you should look at this because it was in a peer-reviewed journal. This is real medicine.
And they found the rate to be 0.7 out of 10,000, so less than 1 in 10,000. There's another study similarly.
Let me guess. Right about the time they first named autism as being different or a subset of being mentally challenged or mentally retarded, depending on what phrase you were using at that time. Notice he's got no date on this study. Just trust me, bro. And that nothing's changed since.
Important study in 1985 in North Dakota.
Yes, remember the word autism was everywhere in 1985.
They looked at virtually every kid in the state, and they found that there were 60 kids with autism in
Well, in North Dakota, you can look at every kid in the state because it's like 190.
the state. It was about three per 10,000. So it went from 1 per 10,000, less than 1 per 10,000 to 3 per 10,000. Today, 2 years ago, it was 1 in 36. The CDC data that we released this week shows 1 in 31, but it's a state-by-state data. And the worst state is California, which actually has the best collection methodology. So,
right, because California pays attention to the needs of the education of children and the like, and they don't shy away from the fact that there may be, you know, even on the thin end of the autism spectrum, assistance you can give these kids to help them live the most full lives, because California gives a shit.
actually probably reflect what we're seeing nationwide. In California, it's 1 in every 20 kids and 1 in every 12.5 boys. And if you look,
No. First of all, I don't know where that half a kid is, but you'll have large collections of areas where they might diagnose or overdiagnose, or they might have a more higher prevalence of it. But you don't have 2 full-blown autistic kids in every classroom of 30 kids. You don't. And they're not all boys. Like, think about these numbers. Think about the way he's saying this kind of flippantly. And think about that most classes have 30 kids in them, any given class. And the idea that these are all like, like heavily, highly autistic, extremely, nonverbal, can't function, all this kind of stuff. That's the assertion he's making here. Like, this number has just gone through the fucking roof.
minority numbers, which we don't do very well, is much worse. And the low functioning autism, in other words, people who have full blown autism, which is about.
And there are degrees.
Oh, yeah, there are degrees. About 25% of the population of that, kids with autism, about 25% of them are nonverbal, non-toilet trained. They have all these stereotypical behaviors: head banging, biting, toe walking, stimming.
Yeah, again, all stuff that we associated with a myriad of variations of mentally challenged or mentally retarded for decades. They just changed the name of it in an attempt to go, oh, they're not unreachable. There was this belief that like deaf kids, like after they realized that deaf kids weren't retarded back in the, in using the phrase they were using at the time in the like 60s and 70s, they're like, oh, he's not mentally challenged. He just can't hear. Once they had a test for that, suddenly, magically, the number of mentally challenged kids goes down, but deafness goes up statistically through the fucking roof. What, is there something in the water? No, it's because we recognized that we were misreading what was going on with these kids.
And that population is growing higher and higher. So it's becoming a larger percentage. So we're seeing much, much more.
Also, fuck you. They're also scraping off the tails of the autism spectrum and saying this kid's just distracted or whatever. They were originally saying this kid's on the spectrum, and then they're saying it's too thin to be a real diagnosis, and there's enough variability in it to go, your kid's just interesting. He's just on his own. He's just bored. He's going through a phase. It's hormonal. Kids go through different phases. It's not a disorder. He's just a fucking kid. She's just a fucking kid. And the parents, will get a diagnosis from one doctor and not one from another. And then that takes the taper off the end of autistic. So what that means is, as you eliminate, say, 15% of people who used to be on the spectrum, the overall number gets smaller, and the people who are severely autistic, who are in the dead center of it, are a bigger percentage of the group now. If you pair off the people who are barely on the spectrum, then the people who are deeply in the spectrum will, of course, show up more, and the numbers will get more dense. Like, this is just so fucking stupid as a reading of, like, And again, dude's not a sociologist, not a statistician, not a medical doctor, just a bullshitter. I mean, he does have some medical experience in that he used to be an intravenous heroin user. So he's done some self-medicating.
Cases that are now linked to severe intellectual disability.
So you actually...
Right. What we used to call mental retardation or mentally challenged. And they call it severe autism because there's back years ago, they didn't make any discrepancy between the two. Because why bother? The kid's just not talking, can't understand things, overreacts, can't deal with noises, and he's in a group of other kids who have the same generalized problem. They don't talk, they don't understand things. He just, honest to God, he doesn't drool. So therefore, there must be something else going on, that his brain is functioning, but he's having a reaction. So maybe that's not this, maybe it's this. But they're still in this, they used to just lump them all together. And then if you try to lump them all together and you try to help them, you won't be able to, because any treatment you come up for one part of them that works won't work with the others, because they don't actually have the same malady. They don't have the same fucking problem. And if they have autism, there may be, hopefully, a way to reach them that you might not be able to reach someone who, who was born with water in the brain or has a physical defect of the brain.
Got emotional yesterday while talking about children suffering from the disorder. You lashed out at the media, which they're a bunch of ignoramuses and jackasses, and I'm not fond of them, so I'm glad you did.
You are in the media, you fucking asshole. And I would argue that you are a jackass and an ignoramus, so touche.
And you said they were in epidemic denial.
No, they're not. Just because we don't want your fucking snake oil doesn't mean we don't know there's an illness. If you know somebody who has like cancer and they're just, and you fucking come by selling fucking patchouli and sage oil, and we tell you to go pound sand, we're not denying that they have cancer. We're just telling you to take your fucking snake oil and fuck off.
Autism destroys families, and more importantly, our greatest resource are children. And then these are kids. You said they'll never hold a job. They'll never pay taxes, meaning for a society. People mistook that. Then you added, they'll never play baseball, write a poem, go out on a date. They'll never be able to live on a...
First of all, there's a show on Netflix called Love on the Spectrum. It's about autistic kids that are actually falling in love with each other. And a lot of the audience that basically people, anybody who knows somebody with autism, or has anybody in their family that has autism, is probably either seen it or is aware of it if they don't outright watch it. So he got a lot of blowback because people aren't stupid about the issue the way they were 10 years ago when he started blaming vaccines for it. Secondly, there's a narrow band of kids who have autism that would fall into the mentally challenged category, or a kid with ALS or MS or something like that won't have those capabilities either. But there are organizations that are looking for cures and preventative measures to stop those things. And just because, again, they're not buying your snake oil, or the fact that you want to blame fucking vaccines and kill a bunch of other kids in the process of ignoring any of the real solutions these people have been looking for, is the problem people have with him and with fucking Hannity here.
Their lives. You're talking about the totality of their life. And people seem to just want to put their head in the sand and not look at the scientific numbers.
Yeah.
No, they don't. No. No, the scientific numbers are, that's only 25% of them. And he talked about autistic kids as if they're all like that. He spoke loosely and caught shit for it, and he's having to walk it back. Shut the fuck up. You can apologize for him. You can say you obviously, did you mean to say that, or were you misconstrued? I was misconstrued. I was speaking specifically to the small window of kids. That's what he's on here for. That's what he's going to say, more than likely.
What do you think is causing this?
Let me say this. There are many kids with autism who are doing well. They're holding down
no shit
jobs. They're getting paychecks. They're living independently. But I was specifically referring to that 25%.
Then say that. And don't say that people who defend kids who aren't in that 25%, that they're ignoring autism, because the people who got the most upset about it are parents of, friends of, lovers of, partners of, sons and daughters of the 75% that aren't in that 25%, and they responded with a gigantic "fuck you."
Group that is nonverbal.
That was clear. You were not ambiguous.
Right.
Yes, he was.
I thought you were clear.
Right. And you know what? The larger point is that the media has bought into this industry canard, this mythology, that we're just seeing more autism because we're noticing it more, we're better at recognizing it, or there's been changing diagnostic criteria. There is,
which is true.
After study in the scientific literature going back decades that says that that's not true. In fact,
well, the fact that it goes back decades and the expansion of the definition of it has gone in correlation with that could track a causative rise in the number of people diagnosed. The depth of the diagnosis and the irreversibility of the diagnosis would point to an epidemic in that regard. Instead of, they initially thought some people were autistic and they took them off the list. And for a while it was expanding too much, so they dialed it back. And by doing that, dialing it back increases the center of the most severe cases as a bigger percentage of them, while you're still choosing to use fucking statistics from a decade ago when it was at its highest expansion point.
California legislature in 2013 asked the Mind Institute at UC Davis to look exactly at that topic. They said, is it real, or are we just noticing it more? And the Mind Institute came back and said, absolutely, this is a real epidemic. This is something we've never seen before. But anybody with common sense, Sean, would notice that, because...
One moment, please. Let's go to here. Mine is a 2013 autism study. Early technology. I'm trying to find 2014. Here you go. UC Davis, here you go. This is I think what he's talking about. UC Davis Mind Institute researchers launched study examining autism in girls. Autism is far more common in boys than girls, affecting 1 in 54 boys, 1 in 252 girls. But little is known about the biological difference between boys and girls with autism. A new study called the Girls with Autism Imaging of Neurodevelopment, or GAIN study, led by researchers UC Davis Mind Institute. We know that the incidence of autism is much lower in girls than it is in boys, but we don't know how much. We don't know much about why that is and what those differences are, because autism is so much more common in boys. Girls are often understudied, and we haven't had a chance to evaluate them in depth. Okay, this is the beginning of that study. That's their media contact and all that kind of stuff. We will jump over, screw around over here, pick this up, move, you silly thing. Oh, I gotta move it down. What is happening? Go out of here. Okay. Trying to find the immune system in autism. That's 2018. Early intervention for childhood autism. That's the NIH in 2015. Child Mind Institute, Autism Center Research Labs. The Child Mind Institute, Rising Autism Rates, What Parents Really Need to Know. This is a YouTube video about it in what year? It was a year ago. So the child, and I don't know if this is the same child. Let's see, 1 year ago, a clinical psychologist at the Child Minds Institute, insights from a recent CDC report, 22% rise in the number of 8-year-olds diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder from 2018 to 2020. Martin discusses the implications of the work. Okay, so the Child Mind Institute versus the Mind Institute are two different things. Let's see what they have to say.
April is Autism Acceptance Month. In the past 20 years, the number of autism cases in U.S. children has more than tripled, and new CDC numbers show that they're still going up. In 2020, about 1 in 36 8-year-olds were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder.
By the way, you'll notice that this is from a year ago, and they're referencing 2020. and the numbers are fairly static, which points to a rise in them and then a leveling off of the medical diagnosis itself.
Up from 1 in 44 in 2018. Also, for the first time in 2020, higher percentages of Asian and Pacific Islander, Hispanic, and Black children were diagnosed than white children. Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disorder that can affect a child's social skills, communication, and behavior. Clinical psychologist Cynthia Martin from the Child Mind Institute joins us right now. Good morning, Cynthia. How are you doing?
Morning. Doing well.
So, 22% rise in autism cases in 2 years may seem concerning to most, but you say it's a good thing.
Yeah, well, one thing that I think we want to also be aware of is that we are coming out of a global pandemic where there were a lot of numbers that were going out. So any numbers that are going to affect children are going to have parents on high alert.
Okay.
So, but these numbers, detecting autism, identifying autism within our broader community is something that has been underway for years and for decades. And what these numbers are in part reflective of is better detection of autism, and not just detection, but actually taking those children who are detected of having autism and getting them linked with a medical provider or getting them identified within a school system as actually having autism spectrum disorder. So this rise in diagnosed cases of autism is a positive thing.
Yeah. So I'll see if I can find the Mind Institute part of this whole thing that he was talking about. But a year ago, she was saying, she's from the Child Mind Institute who studies this all the time. She's saying exactly what he's poo-pooing. Let's see. Theory of Mind and Autism, a case study, Gupta, cited 2012. Longitudinal studies from 22 to 2021. ASD is a neurobiological disorder. The GAIN study, early detection labs. Yeah, I'm trying to find his 2013. I looked up Mind Institute 2013 autism study, UC Davis. Try that. It seems to be the girls with autism thing is what came. Okay, Autism Phenome Project. Welcome to the Autism Phenome Project. Autism can look different to different people. We know that not every therapy or treatment is helpful for everyone. Aim to identify groups of children with common traits and work. Okay, early childhood, middle childhood. Okay, so they're going through the actual treatment because the Mind Institute at UC Davis focuses on this in particular. So let's go to research and research findings. Measuring, okay. The genetic study, autism and ADHD in younger siblings, 2018 study. The maternal immune system and autism. This is one of the other ones that has come up a bunch, which is that during pregnancy things happen. Health of autistic college students compared to their neurotypical peers. Benefits of telehealth. Okay, this is a lot of 2020 stuff. Mutations in this gene that lead to autism and or epileptic seizures. California Autism Professional Training and Information Network. All good that we're taking care of kids and people with autism. Alterations in brain wiring associated with changes in autism. Screen time and associated with hyperactivity and inattention, which often get lumped in with autism but aren't. Should we just scroll back to wherever, I don't know how much further back to go. The role of maternal autoantibody exposure, intestinal illness or anything. Okay. Looking at faces may signal onset of autism in infants. Engineering non-hallucinogenic versions of psychedelics. Excuse you? Autism characteristics in individuals with Down syndrome. Okay, whether telehealth can work. Okay. Point being is that I don't know where this study. Maybe this. We'll do one more thing. I'm not ready to give up yet. Let me do one more, which is rates of autism. It's a very side. It's difficult to pinpoint the exact autism rates reported in the specific study without further details. However, in various ones. Okay, here we go. However, 2020, the Center for Disease Control reported that 1 in 36 children born today were diagnosed with autism. Additionally, in 2022, they found that 32.2 out of 1,000 children, 1 in 31, were identified with it in 2022. So it went down from 2021 to 2022. That's interesting. The Mind Institute also focuses on research causes, autism resources, the Autism Phenome Project. Yeah. UC Davis. That's good. Published works. Nope. Okay. Insofar as I know, talking out of his ass. And also, according to what I just found out, the number went down in 2022.
The autism, this epidemic is only happening in our children. It's not happening in people our age. And if it was better recognition, you'd see it in 70-year-old men.
Also, what are you talking about? In 70-year-old men, a lot of them don't survive. They didn't survive to 70 because we didn't know what we were dealing with. People with Asperger's got killed in fucking bar fights. People with like autism got institutionalized when they were young and never got out.
And I'll say this, I want to be very careful when I say it, because I've never seen a person with full-blown autism. I've seen many people with Asperger's and, on the spectrum who are my age. I've never seen anybody with full-blown autism. That means nonverbal, non-toilet trained. Is that you don't see these people walking around a mall.
No, you're right. You don't see a lot of nonverbal, non-toilet trained people walking around a mall, you absolute fuckhead. They're institutionalized. They can't care for themselves. But you know what you have seen walking around a mall? Their loved ones, their relatives, the people that care for them, the people who work at the institutions where they have to live because they can't live on their own. They just called it something else. What the fuck is wrong with this dude? Jesus Christ. Chad, am I losing my mind? Is this... Yeah, or they're homeless, right? Or they're addicted to drugs, or they're in a nursing home. Good Lord. What the fuck? At the mall, like the fucking dismissive bullshit. And like, how fucking dare you? Just like, it's like he just ignores like the caregivers that are all around us that have to take care of people who are in that position and have forever. Jesus Christ. And this is, by the way, I'd like to remind everybody, this is the cleanup tour. This is him trying to fix this.
They don't exist in our age, or they're very, very rare. They do exist, but they're rare, so rare that I've never.
Yeah, you know why? Because they die. What are you talking about? Like, it's how do you even wrap your head around like the dismissive bullshit coming out of this asshole? Good God. Like, you don't see him walking around the mall. You don't see nonverbal, non-toilet trained adults walking around the mall. Yeah, you're right. So why don't you do a town hall and ask about if anybody there cares for someone who's in that situation or knows of someone who does, or who has had to institutionalize a family member because they can't speak and they can't bathe themselves and they have violent outbursts because they have seizures internally and all kinds of stuff going, like their system's just going haywire all the time. Watch the fucking hands go up. And watch the fucking hands go up in red states where people are paying for their relative to be institutionalized with Medicaid. Go look at the Medicaid numbers.
And I've been around intellectual disabilities my entire life.
Yeah, but that, I mean, besides Hannity and Trump, who?
But in our children's age group, they're everywhere. It's 1 in 20 boys. And in California, 1 in 12.5 boys has autism, and 25% of those look like that.
Where is this?
No, they don't. Jesus Christ, man. They absolutely do not. 25% of the kids with autism are not nonverbal and can't go to the bathroom in the current diagnosed spectrum that's out there. And the fucking dismissal of this is just grotesque. And if anything, one of the things that we see from this is that the reason they talk in broad representative numbers and they don't like the spectrum, they'll say ASD so they don't have to say spectrum so people don't know that they're full of shit, is that the number must be extraordinarily small or you wouldn't be able to like everybody you deal with, a quarter of the people you'd run into would have autism to a degree that they would be nearly non-functional.
Science pointing? Where? I mean, we are getting data. They are investigating it. Where do you think we're going to end up? What is your best guess, hypothesis, theory at this point?
Let me guess. You've been saying it's vaccines this whole time. I call bullshit. I think you're going to back away from that claim because after you've been there a couple of weeks and you've had the studies shoved in your fucking face by people who actually do this for a living, that it's not going to turn out that way. And you're hoping it's a food additive that we can just get rid of, one of them. And I hope it is too. I hope you find that one fucking thing. But then I also want you to go, you know what? I was barking up the wrong fucking tree. And because I was so fixated on this vaccine thing for years, I missed what was right in front of all of us. And a bunch of people died because I was a fuckwad. How about that?
Well, President Trump asked me to find out what's causing it. And I'm approaching that agnostically. We are looking at everything we're going to do. We're going to be very transparent in how we design the studies. We're going to farm the studies out to 15 premier research groups.
Oh, you mean the ones that Trump is cutting the funding for? Honestly.
Over the country. And we're going to be transparent about our protocols, about the data sets, and then every study.
You mean like every other study is? What are you talking about? What? I'm sorry. Do you think like when Harvard Medical School or UC Davis does a study, they just hide everything? What do you mean?
Will have to be replicated. We're going to look at mold. We're going to look at the age of parents. We're going to look at food and food additives. We're going to look at pesticides and toxic exposures. We're going to look at medicines. We're going to look at vaccines. We're going to look at everything.
Well, that's the quintessential definition of science.
Oh, fuck you.
And you're going to get to the bottom of it.
Says who? To borrow Michael Cohen's favorite phrase. Says who? Well, how do you know he's going to get to the bottom of it? Maybe he's going to get to the bottom of the fucking junk drawer, root around, and not come up with anything. What then? What happens when September rolls around and this motherfucker goes, we think it might be one of the blue dyes. It could be black mold. We don't really know. I'm going to go back to telling people not to get the measles vaccine because we got too many fucking kids roaming around out there.
About 20 seconds. How long do you think it'll take?
I think we'll have some preliminary answers in 6 months. But it'll take...
We already have preliminary answers.
Probably a year from then before we can have definitive answers because a lot of these studies will not go out until the end of the summer.
All right.
And I'm very grateful to President Trump for putting me in this position.
Yeah, that's how you know this was an apology tour. He's got to throw that in like ass-kissing shit, and that's what Hannity told him to make sure he says.
We are going to have an answer, and we're going to have it very quickly.
We appreciate you coming in. Good to see you.
Thank you, Sean.
Pitiful. Ugh. It's just gross. Just what a jackass.